Coach, how you feel, man?
I feel great. It's
Got
good
a little
to be
hat
here.
on, a little gear.
Yeah, I'm trying to up my gear game a little bit. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. Well, you're kind of used to this. You've been on TV and stuff like that before, so this is nothing new, huh?
Done a little bit.
Okay. That TV that happened in San Antonio, right?
That's right.
You're doing. San Antonio's very near and dear to you.
It is.
Birthplace, right?
It's my birthplace.
And tell us about San Antonio. There's a lot of myths and stuff that people say about San Antonio, but why is that home to you? Why is that so important?
So, my family, both my mom's side and my dad's side, are both from San Antonio. So it's a longer lineage than just me being born there. I grew up in a small town about an hour south called Floresville, but Floresville was not the big city. San Antonio was the big city. So San Antonio was always where we had to go to get really anything. And so we would make our trips in. But I grew up my whole life being around the city of San Antonio. Ended up going to high school there. My family moved back into the city as I got closer to high school, went to high school there. And when I was trying to figure out my college search, I was looking everywhere but San Antonio, because I was like probably most young people who were thinking I'm going to get out on my own and be independent and do all those things, and ended up staying. Not where I was expecting to go, but I'm glad that I did. It was a phenomenal experience. But San Antonio is a great city. It's a big city with a real small town feel. People are friendly. It's pretty laid back. Mm-hmm. It's part of what I loved about my time here when I came to visit, is just really getting a sense that the people, there were some similarities, some traits of just people that you could connect with, and were genuine and authentic. And that's what I loved about the people in Lafayette, and reminded me a little bit about my time and experience in San Antonio. But I'm a big Spurs fan, been a Spurs fan my whole life. So I'll have to see if I can get to enjoy the Pelicans. I don't know.
When you start with the Spurs, it's kind of tough to.
Yeah, well, listen, they got some great players, and I know that this university has sent some folks there, and I'm all for supporting the New Orleans and the state of Louisiana in terms of professional sports. But the Spurs are always near and dear to my heart.
So a lifelong Spurs fan. So we talking like Sean Elliott and David Robinson, kind of the basketball, kind of another sport that you love?
Yeah, it is. I love the game. Basketball is so athletic and so fast, and there's so much. I think there's so much intelligence to play the game at a high level, and I've always enjoyed watching basketball, and just the culture of San Antonio. It feels like it tries to kind of mirror itself off of the San Antonio Spurs culture, and it's always been a fantastic culture. Obviously, Coach Popovich and what he's done there, and just the type of community that he's created there within, and Peter Holt within the organization. And funny, you talked a little bit earlier about the broadcast stuff. So SAFC, San Antonio Football Club, is owned by the San Antonio Spurs. It's part of Spurs Sports and Entertainment, and so you see the Spurs' dominance and their cultural influence transcend basketball. It even transcends sports. And that's one of the things I love about who they are and what they do and their identity, is that it's applicable. The things that they prioritize and the things that they value, it's applicable in every area of life. And I think as sports people, as coaches, ultimately as educators, that's what we're responsible for, is creating an environment that's going to transcend those four white lines. It's going to carry on to the lives of these young people, whatever they do and wherever they go.
Did you play basketball?
I did play a little bit of basketball. Now, I was really, really undersized.
Don't try to qualify it now. Let's start from the beginning. When did you first start playing basketball?
Some of the first memories I have of playing basketball was Knights of Columbus Halls shooting free throws and free throw contests. That was kind of the early days.
Okay. We winning those contests, or we were just competitive?
Yeah, no, I might have won one or two. I think I was at least
we'll
competitive.
Check it later.
Yeah, we might have to check back in the history books on that. But that's one of the earlier memories, and then playing middle school basketball. But like I said, and I genuinely was, I think I was 4'10" when I entered high school. So I was really undersized.
Point guard?
Yeah, point guard.
That could shoot free throws.
That could shoot some free throws. I was probably a better defender than I was a basketball player.
Yeah, the undersized hustler. You're
that
that annoying guy.
Yeah, I was that guy. I was that guy.
Did we get a growth spurt in high school or?
Yeah, so between 16 and 17, I grew 8 inches, and that was an interesting year. I was a little bit like a baby giraffe, I think, probably during that
You
year.
got to figure out what to do with all that.
Yeah, what do I do with those extra 8 inches, right? So there was a big spurt there, and then in terms of size, I put on 50 pounds my freshman year of college. So I did that between sort of 18 and 19. So height was 16 to 17, and size was 18 to 19. But I come from a line of athletes. My dad was a professional football player, played in the NFL for a long time, and 6'6", probably 280, 290 when he played.
So the spurt was going to happen. We just didn't know when.
Well, everyone kept waiting for it to happen. It was like, who is this kid? Does he belong with you guys? But no, it finally came.
When did you start playing soccer?
3. Yeah, I was. So
you were on the orange team.
Yeah. So I grew up, like I said, I grew up in a small town, and so starting to play soccer was pretty informal at that point because we lived out in the country, and we didn't have goals, we didn't have grass in a lot of places. It was sand, and so it was just really getting out with the ball and kind of doing stuff, just playing in the yard. And I just happened to choose the soccer ball more often, I guess, than not. And then my parents started a league in this little small town because driving to San Antonio for everything was a challenge, especially at that time. So they started a league in Floresville, and I played. I've got an older sister and older brother. They both played. My parents both played in adult leagues, and created a nice little league for a small rural town in Texas, and just continued on as I got more competitive and I got more into it. We started to make the move to teams in San Antonio, kind of around the 10, 11, 12 age range. And then we moved up to San Antonio full time a couple of years later, and then I just continued to run with it. I love the game. I mean, it was something that I was competitive at. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. I was around it all the time, and my size really didn't matter. And I think that was kind of a piece that was a piece to play in the whole puzzle. And I being undersized, you learn to, as you said, to hustle and fight and claw and scratch. And so when I went from being a 5'2" sophomore to a 5'10" junior in high school, I didn't lose all that scratch and claw and fight.
Right.
And when I went,
came back a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when I went to college, and I was 134 pounds as a freshman when I checked in, and I was 185 at the end of the year, I didn't lose all that claw and scratch and fight.
Yeah.
And so my whole life, certainly from a competitive standpoint, it's always been kind of from this, shall I say, underdog mentality where I was the guy who wasn't supposed to be able to. And that's, I love to work, and it's there's so much opportunity that can be created through our own mentality and our own work rate. And that's certainly something that I try to continue to do, no matter where I am and what position I find myself in. You don't lose those attributes that got you there. Any
football?
I played a little football. Again, it's real hard to be 4'10" in high school.
You got a lot of excuses on these other sports.
And playing football. I did play football. I was a wide receiver. I was just really wide. I was exceptionally wide. And I did a little kicking, little place kicking.
Okay.
Kind of made more sense with my size. And so I got to do a little bit of that. My dad, actually, he coached at a high school within the district that I went to, but not the same high school that I went to. So he coached at that different school. So at my senior year, I got to put it on him a little bit from the tee.
Why Trinity?
It's a good question. As I said, I was looking really everywhere, and I wanted to go out of state, and I was looking at some big schools, the North Carolinas, the Notre Dames, those types of schools that I appreciated the academic component that they offered, but also appreciated the level of experience and competitiveness and quality of program and that sort of thing. I wanted to play professionally. That was really a big part for me, is I wanted to play the game at a professional level. And at the time when I was going through the search, I had an opportunity to play kind of a showcase event that the Trinity coach had put on for the local players, and he brought in a few coaches to watch the local San Antonio kids, and I was one of them. So I got to play there and got to know him a little bit through the process, and he was really trying to help me. At that time, my sister had a little boy And my nephew I was the youngest, and then of three, and then my nephew came along, and he and I we were thick as thieves. We would just love to spend time with each other, and my mom and I were really, really, really close. And when it came down to it, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to leave and lose the time and lose the opportunity to be around family, and so.
That's a heavy decision for a
real heavy, and but thought out, and part of it is I really feel like God kind of led me through that process, because as much as I loved my family and really wanted to be around them, I still had these aspirations to go and play professionally, and I just didn't see myself being able to play at the professional level coming out of a small private school in San Antonio. And so that's why I was looking at some of the schools that I mentioned. Being undersized, those schools didn't have a great appreciation for me at that point, because at that point that was when I was sort of 5'10", 130 pounds, and that didn't really line up with ACC body frame. So conversations with the coach at Trinity, kind of working through that, him being a part of it, and trying to help me, trying to facilitate really an opportunity for me to go somewhere and play, and people just kind of turning and saying, there's some things there, but it's just not going to work out for us. He made a promise to me that I don't know if he thought he would be able to keep or not, but he said, I promise you, if you'll come here, you'll still have the opportunity to play professionally. And I believed him. He was a great recruiter, because I didn't know that they were 7-11-2 the year before I got there. So I got there. We had a great class. A lot of guys that I had played with and against in kind of the club circuit, and we went 18-2 that first year, and really never looked back. Had a great playing career. The programs continued to have tremendous success. He's a mentor of mine. Coach McGinley, who's the men's coach there, is a mentor of mine. Somebody I consider to be a really, really good friend. Got a chance to spend some time working alongside him, which creates a new dynamic. But he's just a phenomenal guy, and has done a tremendous amount for me in my life. And I'm so grateful as I look back now that I ended up at Trinity. So why Trinity? Thank God it was Trinity.
Well, you had a ton of success there. So 3-time All-American, Player of the Year your senior season.
Yeah.
Did you know you'd be that successful there?
I think I hoped I would, but I didn't really know. It's like anything. You don't know what you don't know, right?
But in your mind, you thought you were a ACC level, SEC level soccer player.
I was hoping so.
Yeah.
I was hoping so. And to see it kind of develop as it did, I guess it was real, but it was surreal as well. And just achieving that level, and I think being able to grow so much, and then also to be able to do that with my mom 30 minutes away. There was a lot of value to me in that experience, and having my mom around and being able to see my nephew on a regular basis. And but yeah, I think in the end, the opportunity to go on and play beyond there after the successful career that I had there had a lot to do with having a mentor on the field, somebody who could teach me the game, and not be the same naive player coming out at 22 as I was coming in at 18. But also just being around an environment where excellence is just what you do, and I think he did a great job of recruiting the right type of people, the right type of human beings, to put that environment together so that we all could thrive. I mean, we had some great players that I got to play alongside, and guys that scored a ton of goals. I was the guy that played at the back and tried to break things up. I had a chance to score some goals on free kicks and corners and things like that. But he just put together a lot of great talent and did a good job of managing the personnel once they were there, and then just expecting more out of us. And we went from 7-11-2 to 18-2. So now what? Once you go 18-2, is it sustainable?
Right.
And so sustaining success over a long period of time is not easy to do either, because there's always things that come in and that challenge that dynamic and challenge that culture and that setting. And so I look at the sustained success that he's had over the course of his career there, and it's remarkable. What he's been able to do there, and so I'm grateful for that time that I got to spend there. Because ultimately, like I said, he was my coach, he was my mentor. Some days he was my dad, and then being able to transition over to now he's my colleague, and he's still my mentor and still my friend. And our relationship going through these different dynamics over the course of time was really invaluable as I look back. I couldn't place a value on it.
Well, he helped you lead the charge and being so consistent on the field as a player, which led to you being drafted.
That's right.
To the majors. But before that, you earned your degree.
That's
in
right.
Philosophy.
Yeah.
How important was it for you to finish your education?
Extremely important. I remember, so I got drafted out it was, I think, January of my senior year. So I was in classes. I was enrolled in classes. I left for the senior game, which is an invite only. It used to be done by Umbro back then. I don't even know if Umbro's still out there.
They are. I think they're more in beach gear.
Yeah, maybe so. So Umbro used to sponsor that event, and so I was one of two or three players out of the Division III environment that got an invite to that. It was probably 60 players deep, mostly Division I guys, mostly guys that got drafted into the league came from that event, and it was a fantastic experience. I loved it, but I remember my dad saying, at the end of the day, you can't eat that ball. Get your degree. Because he got drafted out early by the Philadelphia Eagles, went out to Pottstown and played for their team for a year, developmental league, and then got brought into the Eagles, but he didn't get his degree. So he went all the way through his playing career, 12 years or something in the NFL, and then got out, didn't have his degree, and went some time. And then he wanted to, at that point, kind of, as a lot of professional athletes will experience and discover, when the career's over, now what? Mm-hmm. It's been such a part of your identity for so long. That's what you know. It's who you are. It's in your DNA. You wake up in the morning and you make decisions as a competitive athlete. So when you're no longer that competitive athlete, how do you fit in? Right. And that's a real challenge. But he when he had to make that decision, he was making it from a place of not having his degree, and his last college class was over a decade ago. So now what?
He has to relearn how to
So
learn.
he's going to have to go back and get his degree if he's going to try to get into the coaching game and wanted to coach high school and those types of things. He had to have his degree. So he had to go through that process in a really difficult time because of how much time had separated him from the last classroom setting. And so he told me, get your degree. So I arranged it. I was real fortunate. I had some professors that worked with me so that when I went away, I was actually taking some courses by correspondence, the first part of that next semester. So I missed I missed that spring semester, picked it up again in the fall of 2000, and I was taking courses by correspondence until the end of our Major League Soccer season, and then I came back and finished in the classroom and then wrote my exams and was able to graduate in December. So I was grateful of his influence because it stuck with me, and I thought, okay, I need to make sure this happens. Well, I didn't know that 4 months before graduation, I was going to have 2 concussions back to back, and then I didn't know that 12 months later I was going to have 2 more, and the league was going to not renew my contract. So had I not gone and gotten my degree at that point in time, I would have been out of the league with nothing to fall back on, and then having to restart that whole process. So listen, if anyone would ever ask me how important is finishing your degree, you cannot underestimate the value of completing your degree.
Vital in a situation where firsthand experience, injuries knock you out of your dream.
That's right.
What was it like, that moment when you're told it's unsafe for you to come back?
It's tough, really tough, because I said that's your identity. It's who you are. It's what you've done for so long. For the longest time, I had a hard time even watching the game afterwards. Because I so wanted to be back in that environment. You're competitive, and you wake up in the morning and you're excited about the opportunity to go and compete with somebody at something. And so then that now is gone in your life. There's a massive void. And so also you think about, for me, my path and what I was trying to do, and I was always kind of on the outside looking in many ways, even from a Division III institution. Not many Division III players are getting into into major leagues. And so even from where I came from to get in was on the outside looking in. Then I finally get there and I have the opportunity to earn a spot, and I was fortunate to be able to do that and play a lot. And then you just don't expect that 12 months later you're going to have 4 concussions, and you're not only can you play, but they just won't allow you to play. And that was a real challenge, not being in control of those things. As athletes, a lot of times we get those kind of type A personalities develop where we really like to be able to control as much as possible.
For sure.
And when that's completely gone from you, it's a life changer. I mean, it really, really was a tough time. And then on top of just the emotional component was the neurological component of having 4 concussions in a short time and dealing with all of the kind of post-concussive syndrome and the migraine headaches and the nerve palsy in the eye and all those kinds of things that came along with it, compounded with the emotional component of just having your dream just dissipate in front of you. That was a tough time.
Let's stay here, Coach, because I think the word concussion has been used so much in the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years that it's just kind of become a regular word now and not taken as seriously in just regular conversation. But you having that firsthand experience, talk me through what a concussion actually feels like. Do you know? Yeah,
so there's grades of concussion. So you can have kind of a light bell ring, and you might have some nauseousness. You might have a little sort of unsettled, your balance, things, little light components there. And then you can go to your severe grade where you're dealing with loss of consciousness, you're dealing with amnesia, loss of memory. And I've experienced the gamut of those, and my last one was really the bad one, where there was a loss of consciousness and still to this day, no recollection of really the 24 hours either side of the event. And then all the things that come after it as well. And they're, when you deal with the brain, and I think going back 20 years, think about how little they knew about it at that point in time, because I still think there's a lot of things that doctors are really trying to discover about what concussions are, what the true impact, both short-term and long-term is. But there's a compounding effect. And so it's not like you get one and then you kind of heal and recover, and then the next one is kind of starting from scratch. You're putting one on top of the other. And so I'm grateful that they are focusing a lot more on it in all sports, being a lot more conscious of it. But I still think there's a lot that they just really don't know about it. And that's difficult. And you think about, I go back to, I think about my dad and the era of Veteran Stadium and that hard turf field and those helmets that, aren't anything like what the technology has provided our current players with. And I think about just the repetitiveness and all of the damage that goes into the body through that over the course of time. I just look at how many athletes have come through, the major league sports and all sports, and have sustained injuries, particularly those types of injuries that have really, really long and negative long-term consequences, that just weren't understood enough to even be identified at that point in time. And I, even me, that wasn't that long ago. 20 years ago wasn't that long ago. But there's so much that I don't think they really understood then. And I had one of the doctors that was working with me was, he was the main doctor in consultation with the International Olympic Committee, and was working with the hockey players that were sustaining those injuries and those types of things at that time. There wasn't a whole lot of soccer head injuries, at least not we heard or saw a lot about. And I don't know if the 4 that I had were all I had, because there's probably times where you get your bell rung and you just kind of carry on. But
you still you suffer from any after effects to this day?
I do. I get headaches a lot. I get them a lot, and that's kind of a whole managing those is a challenge. Light sensitivity, which being out in the sun, for long periods of time is what we do.
It's kind of where they play.
It's what I do as a soccer coach, and so learning to kind of cope with that and manage that has been a challenge. I've got to really be sensitive and understand when something's coming on, to be able to try to counter it and manage it. For a long, long time, it would be, kind of lights out, no sound, no light of any kind. Had to be in as dark a place as I could get for hours, just to try to get through, a headache. And it was 3-4 times a week.
Really?
Yeah, it was. Which is totally life altering. You can't. It's hard to be a normally functioning human being and live a normal life. 3 or 4 days a week, you have to disappear into a dark room, and. And
I think some people would say, "Hey, well, you could just sleep," but You're not sleepy.
Yeah, no, and sometimes it hurts just to put your head on a pillow, but where else are you going to put it?
Right.
So sleeping's really not. It'd be the best thing is if you could get some sleep, but sometimes you can't. But that's part of it. I mean, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change my experience. I wouldn't change my ambitions and my goals and the encouragement and the support that I got from my family and to see that dream play out. It didn't happen the way I had anticipated, but it's afforded me an opportunity to do a lot of other things that maybe I would not have done otherwise had I had a 15-year career in Major League Soccer or what have you.
Only Division III player drafted to the majors that year. You go up to Colorado. You leave home to go to Colorado. What was that like for the Rapids?
I loved it. I mean, Colorado's a beautiful place. I told my wife many times if we ever move somewhere else other than Texas, we'll go to Colorado, and then here we are in Louisiana.
It is gorgeous,
yeah. But it's a
Before
great
you answer, how many times did Mom call you per week?
Often. Yeah, Mom and I talked a lot. Yeah, she's a special lady. I'm a mama's boy for sure, and still am to this day. Me and my mom talk a lot, but she was like most soccer moms, sports moms. They're the taxi driver, and they're the do all. You do everything, and somehow figure out a way to get food on the table and get the laundry cleaned and get us up for school and everything that they have to do. I have so much appreciation from my own experience, and then now I see my wife dealing with 3 kids and being back in Texas and managing those 3 while I'm here in the transition, and just mothers are another level. And so, but it was a great experience, and I had the opportunity to go out there and do some preseason training, kind of go on trial, and that was a great experience for me because it really allowed for me to have a transition from where I was at the Division III environment into going and preparing to start a match in the Rose Bowl, my first game. That's a pretty big difference. And so all of those extra days and all that extra time really helped me to transition. I was really fortunate to play along some guys that had a big impact on me as professionals, and just as older guys that I could look to and kind of admire and model after. Some guys were domestic guys and some were international guys that had some tremendous experience playing for some of the world's top clubs that I got a chance to learn from and be in the locker room with and sometimes learn in retrospect from being the kind of young, naive 22, 23-year-old and looking back and at 33 and saying, that's what he was saying. That's what he meant during that time. So all those things that help you go through life. Sometimes they're immediate, and sometimes they're in retrospect. You find the value and the significance of some of the impact and influence that people have in your lives. Obviously, it'd be great if we could always recognize it right then and there, because we all would be. It would expedite our maturation, but it was certainly part of my maturation, and it continues to be really.
Your career's ended by injuries, as we mentioned earlier, and then there's an area between 2001 to 2004 before you get to Trinity.
Yeah.
What's happening in Lansky's life at that time?
So I moved back at the end of the 01 season. I moved back to San Antonio, and I get contacted by a young lady who's looking to train and prepare. She wants to go and get a trial for professional side. She's in the San Antonio area. She's not from there, but she's currently an athletic director of a private school. So she asked me to come and train her, found out that I was going to be back in town. And so I arranged that, and I came and trained her. And I'm not really sure why she was asking me to train her, I guess because she heard I had just come out of the league and was...
That's a slight selling point, yeah.
But she ended up going on and vacating a position that then opened up, and I took. So I took this athletic director position of a private school. I was 22, 23 years old, something like that. And it was a kind of a pre-K through 8.
Okay.
And spent a couple of years there. Got offered a position at a local club in San Antonio. And at that time, it was just a girls' club. So mind you, all of my experience up to this point has been playing. And then I train a lady to get her prepared for a trial. And then I get invited to come and be on staff for a girls' club. I've never coached women before. Mm-hmm. So that's really where the coaching on the women's side of the game really started. Now, between the time that I left the program at Trinity, which was the end of '99, when I went and got drafted, and then I came back. Remember, I said I came back to finish up my degree. I was helping with the men's team that I played for, just volunteering when I could, helping out when I could. So I was staying connected to Trinity. I was staying connected to the college game, but on the men's side, really from in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, and then I took the job at Trinity in '04. But that in between time, I was helping them, but I was also coaching youth girls soccer, and I was coaching under 11, under 12 teams at that point in time.
Girls soccer.
Girls soccer.
Man.
So went from playing to playing professionally to coming in and coaching U11s and U12s, which is they're just getting into their competitive phase, and I look back on that time. Funny story. I actually talked to a young lady just the other day who's now coaching, and I had her in that time frame, those couple of years, as an under 11. She was 10 years old, all knees and elbows, and she went on to have a great career. She played at University of Texas and is now coaching. Phenomenal player, but an incredible human being. But we just had that conversation. So it's funny you mentioned that window of time, because she's one of those that I really remember vividly from that window of time, and it taught me a lot, because again, you don't know what you don't know. I'm coaching now. I'm coaching 11 and 12-year-old girls, which I really haven't coached before, trying to manage and figure out how to calibrate my enthusiasm, my expectations, all of those kinds of things in that setting, and probably asking way too much of those 11 and 12-year-old girls. But fortunately, both them and their parents had some grace for me, and I just learned as I went through. And sometimes that's just what you have to do.
As a standout player in college and then making it to the majors, coaching youth, young girls, what was your patience level like?
Probably, it depends on your perspective. I probably would say it was below average. They might say it was terrible. Let's be honest, right? So, not great. I think not great. And even transitioning into the college game and coaching when I took over at 24 of my first college program, I'm sure, I can promise you that my patience was not where it needed to be and where it should have been. And I think that was really detrimental to my experience and more importantly, the experience of the players, the student athletes that I got to coach during those times. It took me some time to figure that out. Patience really impacts relationship. And as imperfect beings who have really high levels of expectation, sometimes those expectations tend to move near the realm of perfection, because that's where we're just constantly pushing to get better and better and better. But sometimes if you don't harmonize that, then you lose out on the relational component, and that's unfortunately what I think what the experience was for a lot of the student athletes that I coached during those first 5-6 years. Really, is me not finding the right harmony there.
That's strange, because your first year as a coach at Trinity, you destroyed it, right? Weren't you undefeated, untied in year one?
We had a really good year one. We were one of the country going into the tournament. Got a first round bye, and then got upset at home in the second round. And I look at games like that, and days like that, experiences like that, and I think it was probably more my naivety and my immaturity as a coach that didn't allow us to push through those moments of adversity and those types of matches. And I think if you look at some of those years and you look at the way that some of those matches ended and our seasons ended, I think I look at that and I probably look at it from the standpoint of I wish I was a little more mature. I wish I was a little more patient. I wish I was maybe a little more thoughtful in not just how I prepared for the match, but how I went through the match and managed the match. And then ultimately how, when those matches ended, for a long time, I would look at, I think I spent too much time focusing on the value of our season hinging on that final day, as opposed to looking at the 16 games that we went undefeated and were one of the country. I was measuring our season by the fact that we lost and were upset in the second round as the top seed in the country. And I think that then carries over into conversations, it carries over into body language, and ultimately it carries over into the relationships. And so then you tend to jeopardize your relationships that you really should be prioritizing and ultimately doing everything for, those end up getting jeopardized by the lack of maturity that I show in being so disappointed in a single day's result. Right? The game of soccer is funny. I mean, you can take 30 shots, the other team can take 2 and they can beat you 2-0. And that's a little unusual in other sports realms. You don't see that nearly as much where the dominant team loses. But that can happen a lot. And not to say that happened in all of those ending games, but there were a fair number of them where I felt like we were the better team. We didn't get the result, frustration, disappointment, all of those things. And then you also look at a class's career, a 4-year career terminating on a day of kind of underperformance or disappointment or just bad fortune on the day. But that can't also be, unfortunately, there were days and games where that was the experience that was the culmination of a 4-year career. And my disappointment, my frustration as a coach, as a young coach in particular, I think did them a disservice.
So you regret some of your actions?
Yeah, I think I wish, I don't like the word regret, but certainly I look back on it and I have disappointment about some of the way I managed those days. Again, I think coming down to just being naive and a little bit immature, not really understanding how significant the relationships were. But I look at where I am now, and unfortunately, there were days and potentially even relationships that were at the expense of where I am now. But I see where I am now with the opportunity and the platform that I have, and recognize that ultimately everything that we do is to educate, to prepare, to empower our student athletes, whether it's football guys or whether it's soccer girls. It's a time in their life, it's 18 to 22, where it's so important that we get this time right for them, for their benefit. And so I learned a lot through mistakes that I made. And sometimes we do that as human beings. We find ourselves in a place on down the road, and we can turn around and look back at the mistakes that we made that helped us get where we are. And the perspective that we have there is really important. Now, my preference would be that I would have had that perspective far earlier in my career. Unfortunately, I look back and I don't think that I did. I value those young women. I appreciate them. I appreciate their parents. Because I was a young coach. I mean, 24, 25, 26, You
were still growing up.
I was still growing up.
Yeah.
And frankly, was still dealing a little bit with the loss of the opportunity to play and that whole component, trying to re-identify myself.
And so your appreciation for the senior class would be different that day.
Sure.
Than today.
Yeah. Well, I think my appreciation even then, it's not that my appreciation now is greater, it's how I demonstrate that appreciation. I had tremendous appreciation for those senior classes when I was 24, 25, 26, 27. But how I showed that appreciation to them and how I allowed myself in the culmination of that season when it ended in disappointment, the way I expressed and articulated that appreciation, certainly in the latter part of my career and to where I think I am today versus where I was in those earlier years, I just didn't do a great job of that. And I allowed the day to disrupt the appreciation for the overall experience.
Just talking to you, Lance, could a Lansky that had gone through to the majors, been an AD, and then came back to his university, could you have, I don't want to use the word humbled, but would you have been able at that time to say, I'll be an assistant coach first? Or I'll be a GA first, or I'll be a...
Yeah, I mean, I was assistant our men's coach during those times.
Yeah, but coming back to your roots at Trinity, would you have been able to come back after being a superstar and say, all right, I'll take a backseat role for a bit?
It's a good question. I certainly could probably have used that. I think just the timing of the opportunity, and when the athletic director, Mr. King, approached me about taking the women's job at 24, it was at a time where I knew that I wanted to be around the game. it was an opportunity to stay around the game and put me back on campus where I had spent so many years anyway, and I had continued to stay connected to even over the years since I had graduated. But yeah, I mean, if I look back and think, where should a 24-year-old former player be from a coaching standpoint? It's probably not. It's probably not running a program. Figuring out what flights we're going to take and what hotels we're going to stay at, and all of these kinds of things that you have to do and manage as the head of a program. I probably wasn't. I wasn't as prepared for it as I would have liked to have been, based on the experience I know that some of the players got, the student athletes got during those years. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Nonetheless, you go on and just rip it over your years back at Trinity, and you finished with over an 80% win percentage at the time before you.
I think, yeah. I mean, but I don't know what the percentage was. We had some really good seasons. We were fortunate. We had great players, great human beings, kids that worked exceptionally hard, which fit kind of right in line with my experience. Was I wasn't the greatest player, but I was willing to outwork anybody. And that's where that claw and fight and scrap all comes from, as being that undersized kid going back to my youth. There were players that came in and were willing. They just wanted to get better. Every day they wanted to get better, and they were willing to put the time and the effort and the energy into doing it. And I did everything I could to try to create an environment where not only was that expected, but it was also enabled. And so the young ladies that I got the opportunity to coach there, highly academic, very focused, very committed, and just good quality people across the board. And so we were able to put together some teams that I feel like more often than not we were among the more talented from a soccer standpoint, but the team dynamics and the culture that we had were fantastic. And you can't have a fantastic culture without fantastic people. And so I look at the success that we had during that stretch of time. And again, I think it has so much to do with just quality human beings and them caring about each other, them investing in each other and each other's experiences. That ultimately makes for a great experience for everybody.
11 NCAA Division III women's soccer championship tournaments, 21 All-America student athletes, a couple of National Coach of the Years, 2013 championship game appearance, 75 plus straight home games without a loss. SCAC Coach of the Year 7 times. You stepped away from that. What was that, 2015?
After the 2015 season.
Why?
Had a lot to do with family. I was at an institution where the class schedules were such where there wasn't a lot of offerings. So we trained early in the morning, we trained late at night. We trained 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. We trained 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. We trained 6 a.m. on a Thursday, and we play on a Friday. If we travel, we left on Thursday. We're gone through Sunday night, get back late Sunday night. So as a younger single guy, as even a married guy without children, a little more manageable. You start
100%.
To involve children in the equation, and then you have a child that comes of age to start to express and think a little bit about where's daddy at, And so that was part of it, is trying to find the right way to balance the schedule that I needed to put together for the benefit of the players, the student athletes there. I needed to accommodate their class schedules, and I needed to try to come up with something that was going to make sense for them to be able to navigate from August to hopefully December, and be able to do so successfully. So not wanting to compromise that experience for them, but then also trying to find the right balance to be able to be at home for my wife and be at home for my children, it became very difficult to do. So it got to the point where my oldest, who just turned 7 last week, she started to communicate in her own way, kind of, Daddy, where are you? Why aren't you around why don't we see you in the morning? Why don't we see you at night? That became difficult, really sort of taxing on me from an emotional standpoint. And going back to where we were earlier in our conversation about the influence and the impact that we ultimately have a responsibility to have on our student athletes. It says coach on my door, and it's said coach on my door for a long time, but I got to a point in my career, in part because of some of the mistakes I had made, where I started to really realize that coaching is really the least of what we do. It's a lot more about mentoring, because you coach I coach for 90 minutes a day in season. We start at 6 this morning, we're done at 7:30. It's what I do the rest of the day from 7:30 a.m. until the time I go to bed is really what I'm doing. That's my job. And so taking time to again, to facilitate and create an environment, but then also taking time to visit with and cultivate relationship. Ultimately, what I love about my position is it gives me the opportunity to be a mentor. And I talked so much with my players during that time about mentorship and how they ultimately can go on and be mentors and things that what that looks like. And I realized that I'm trying to set the example for 25, 28, 18 to 22-year-old young women who ultimately are going to go on and they're not going to be students forever, and they're going to get a job, and they're going to at some point probably get married and have children, all these things. And I'm setting the example of a father who has no time for his family. And for me, when it got to that point, and my, at that time, 4-year-old helped me realize that that's how it felt to her, it was a game changer.
When you say got to that point, what do you mean?
Well, it just when she began to make it clear to me how she was perceiving.
Because they're very honest. They're just talking.
Very.
Yeah.
And when it was at the point where she started to communicate again in her way, we don't see it. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm talking about being a mentor to 18 and 22-year-old young women. I talk to them about wanting to be in a position to be able to mentor them and want to be that in what I do, yet I'm not mentoring my own children. So what example am I setting for these 18 to 22-year-old young women as to the type of man, the type of husband, and the type of father that I'm being? I might be doing a reasonable job at being a coach and a leader and a mentor to them, but I'm also giving the example of really what not to do as a dad. And so that was a difficult time for me, and I realized that I was going to have to find some way to change it, and I didn't see. And maybe my lenses were too narrow, maybe they were too cloudy, but I just didn't see at that point in time where I was that I had a whole lot of maneuverability there. I felt like the schedule made sense for the team. It just didn't make sense for my family, and so it was where do I draw that line? And I would tell within our program there, within our culture, we always talked about family first. And I would say if it's family, academics, and soccer, and it's in that order. And it's not to say that soccer's not important because it's third on the list. It's just not as important as your academics, and it's not as important as your family. And if ever there's something that has to take the top spot, it's whatever's above it. It can't be I'm gonna set my family aside today because I've got soccer. We've got to find a way to and I think we can do that. I think creating an environment in college sports where we can facilitate that prioritization, family, academics, and soccer in that order, is very doable. And there's a way to harmonize that. And more often than not, you don't have to be a great family member at the expense of being a great athlete. You can do both. You don't have to be a great athlete at the expense of being a great student. You can do both. But when those moments in life occur, when you have to make a decision, that has to be your priority list. And so I got to that point where I felt like I was at a decision-making spot in my life, and I had to break out my list and look at it: family, academic. And for me, it was family, professional, and then familial. And family, professional, and then for me as a coach, that's not the third piece, right? Because I'm not in academics. I'm not taking my classes. So, but family has to be at the top, and I felt like it wasn't. And my daughter was basically telling me that in her way, that family's about family. You're not here at night. You're not here in the mornings. You're gone Thursday to Monday. I don't see you for 4 or 5 days in a row, and it's just difficult. And we had one younger at that point in time who wasn't communicating that, but it certainly created a little bit more of a perspective for me. So I had an opportunity to make a move. And I felt like at the time, spent a lot of time praying about it and just really trying to be very thorough and exhaustive in the consideration process, and just felt like it was the right move at that time.
How'd you meet your wife, Natalie?
I met her through a church. I was invited to attend this church from her sister, who I bumped into at a grocery store, and she just in a conversation, she asked if I'd gone to church anywhere, and I said I go a little here, I go a little there. Sometimes I don't.
Let's not gloss over this. So you were in the grocery store,
Yeah.
and just a conversation just randomly occurred between you and Natalie's sister.
It's
So you saw her in the aisle.
Essentially, I saw her coming behind me, and then I saw her still the same distance behind me from the fruits to the deli, and then from the deli to the bakery. And all of a sudden, I thought, hang on a second, she's the same distance behind me everywhere I go. Right. So I went back and sort of walked towards her to force the issue. Maybe
Right.
it was coincidence, maybe not. And then so at that point in time, she said, "Listen, I'm married, but are you?" And a few months later, I guess, is when I met my wife, and I started attending that church. I took her up on it one day. I woke up on a Saturday morning and just thought, it's time for me to give that church a try. So I went that night. They had Saturday night services, so I went that night. And my wife was not there at the time because they're originally from South Africa.
Okay.
And so she was back in South Africa with her mom, doing some ministry work and some missionary work there. And so she wasn't there when I started going. So I got to know the church and some of the people in the church before I got to know her. It wasn't for some time down the road that I ended up meeting her. And then here we are these years later and 3 kids.
3 kids now.
3.
2 girls and a boy.
That's right.
How you holding up?
I'm holding up. Mama's got it rough right now. She's back in Texas, and the little guy is mobile now. So that's a game changer. Yeah. So the 2
Which always
girls are
makes it
great.
better for the dad, but never really for the
Not
for
so
the
much
mom.
for Mama.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
The older girls, so they're 7, just turned 7 last week, and then almost 5, and then the little guy is going to be a year in April. And the girls are great. I mean, and they're super capable and can be pretty independent at times, and love little brother, and sometimes help, and sometimes not so much help. But she's dealing with a lot of that, getting them up for school in the morning, getting everybody out the door, and I mean, she's kind of running single mom status a lot of days, which I can relate to because that was my mom, not with us as young as we are, but certainly, and there's a lot of single moms out there, and certainly can appreciate and understand the challenges just to get the kids up and out the door in the morning. Never mind everything else. So, but they're great. Our kids we have 3 beautiful kids, and I could not be more grateful. And I got a fantastic wife who she's a champion.
You and the sister still cool too? Everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
As long as everybody's good.
Yeah,
So,
everybody's good.
The opening at Louisiana happens late last year.
Yeah.
How'd you hear about it?
First conversation was a text conversation with a guy in the game who I'm real close with and have a good relationship with, and he knew that although I wasn't in the game, that's kind of who I am. And at that time, I was doing the broadcasting, and I was assisting back at the men's program at Trinity, going all these years back, and now I'm here again. And so he knew that I was still kind of staying connected to it. And so he had reached out and just said, this job just opened. Is it something that would be of interest to you? And I hadn't really thought of it. I was doing a little coaching, and the men's team at Trinity is still fantastic. I mean, they were, I guess, round of 16 this past year in the NCAAs, and I was doing the broadcasting, and I was enjoying that. Second year in, so I started to get the hang of it a little bit, and licensed real estate agent in the state of Texas, and busy with business, and so I just hadn't really thought about it, and I asked him, my candid response was, I'm not sure, should I be? And he says, well, I've heard a lot of great things about the direction that institution, that department is going. And so I said, okay. And that was kind of left there. Started to research it a little bit and investigate it. And then not that long later, another person in the game reached out to me and said, well, what do you think about this job that's opened up? And I said, well, somebody else mentioned it to me, but I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it. I've looked into it a little bit, surface level, but honestly, I've been so busy, I just haven't really put any focus and attention into it, and that led ultimately to Dr. Maggard reaching out and having just wanting to kind of gauge my interest, and I was so impressed with who he was, what he presented over the phone in that conversation, and had a good conversation with my wife about it, and we weren't really looking to move, and we weren't really looking to kind of shake things up in our life, because we hadn't really been back in San Antonio all that long, relatively speaking. And, all the implications, okay, lifting your family up and taking them to a different place, and kids in a new school and all these sorts of things. So we began to pray about it and just really just seek God and communicate with each other and try to talk through what the implications of this could be. And ultimately, he'd offered to bring me out here to start to look at things more seriously. And so we had that conversation, and I said, just like it would be hasty to say absolutely yes to something right now, it would also be hasty to say it's not for us, because we don't know. Right. So it's something we should explore. It's a door that's open. We've been prayerful about it. We feel like there could be some value and some opportunity here. Let's give it a look. And so just that, and then talking about cultivating relationships, the way that Dr. Maggard cultivated that relationship with us over that course of time was so impactful to our family, and really helped us gauge what we would be getting into, and what the situation would be, what the opportunities were, what the realities were. And in the end, we both felt like this was the right place for us to be. And this was, even though going back to first conversation in a very busy time of life, it didn't jump off the page at me or jump off the screen, so to speak, because of where we were going through the process, learning more about it, and again, the relational component that was developed with Dr. Maggard was really a big impact.
Before you were officially announced, you met with the team, correct?
Yes.
What was that like?
It was great. I was excited to kind of be back in the saddle, so to speak. And like I said, we had spent so much time, my wife and I spent so much time praying about it, discussing it, thinking about it, and really kind of fleshing it out to the point where we felt like this is where we're supposed to be. So coming into that room, I knew I was supposed to be there. And I knew that coming into that situation, what the opportunities were. It's a great time. It's a great place to be and a great time to be here. There's so many resources. The facilities are fantastic, and I just felt like the trajectory can be pretty steep. But we've got to get after it. We got to kind of scale things back down and really get disciplined and be intentional about what we do. And so getting to walk into that room and be announced and see those faces and talk to them about the things that they were really passionate about, I think really aligned with the things that I'm passionate about. And I felt like I was going to be able to come in here and 100% be who I am and do what I do, for better or worse, for right or wrong. It's just, this is who I am. Because ultimately who I am and who they are is where the relationship is going to come together. And so I knew from that conversation and the things that they expressed to us that what my experience has allowed me to evolve into as a leader, as a mentor, was going to allow me to pour into their lives and really try to create something that was special for them, that would give them that platform to go on and be that better sister, daughter, employee, employer, wife, mother, all those things that have far more significance than, what we do on a Friday night in the fall. Those are important, Friday nights in the fall. Huh. But what they go on to do beyond that is of greatest significance.
Shortly thereafter, you've got the staff greeting you. You've got your family with you. You got your nice three-piece suit on, and then you walk into this area, and then you got staff and media, full room of staff, media, pictures going off. What was that feeling like? You're taking over a brand new Division I program.
It was exciting. It was exciting, and I think it spoke a lot to the level of expectation and the standard of what this place is going to be and going to look like in the time moving forward. There's a lot of ways those announcements can happen, but to do it on that scale and on that level with that degree of excellence and expectation is a great indication, not just to me, but to anybody who's watching this program, anybody who's interested in this program, that we're going up. And so it was exciting. It was it was a great experience. I think you guys did a fantastic job, top to bottom, across the board. One, making an event out of it, to say we're going to do special things here, and it's not just going to be in the football arena. It's not just going to be in the baseball diamond. It's going to be everywhere across the board, and I think that statement's powerful. And I was really grateful to be a part of it.
Now, how long had you had that suit? I think you went with what was it, like a light gray with the red, accessories going?
Yeah, I didn't buy that suit brand new for the event. I've had that suit for a little while. But yeah, I think I went red tie, red square, right?
Okay, yeah. You came clean.
Yeah.
Came clean. Oh, that's good, man.
I couldn't show up in a t-shirt, right?
Come on, man. Don't disrespect the culture. How impressed are you of what you've seen on the field? You've been through a couple of spring matches. How you feeling about the on-field product right now?
I feel like we're growing. I feel like we're getting better. I think there's a lot of really good pieces. It's just a matter of, to everybody we can put out the puzzle pieces, and ultimately we've got to piece them all together. And we might see that puzzle a little bit differently in how we go about putting those pieces together. But I think there's some great pieces in place. It's just a matter of maybe just taking a step back and look at it maybe a little bit differently and putting some of those pieces together. Obviously, we've got to continue to grow and build and expand and find some more of those pieces, pull them out of the box. But I think that the pieces that we have are sufficient for us to increase the quality on the field, in terms of the cohesion, the way that we play alongside each other, and really be more collaborative. But I think off the field, I hate to keep using this word culture around here because I know that Coach Napier's come in with guns blazing with the word culture.
It's a whole department now.
But it's so true, and it's I think we see it in sports everywhere. Culture. There's leadership books. I'm a leadership junkie, and it's everywhere. Culture is everywhere, but culture can be it can be a catchphrase, but it can also be a way of life. And I think culture for me is a lifestyle, and it's partially going back in our conversation to getting it wrong. And realizing what things need to be in place. And so we're really being intentional about those things and trying to build relationships. Part of why I'm late today is trying to build relationships with some of the girls.
I didn't want to bring that up. Yeah.
In the in the program. But there's some great kids, and they want to work, they want to be successful. But we're spending a lot of time this spring in particular, where success oftentimes can be measured from one match to the next, but significance is measured by our overall. And so we're really focusing on being significant in the things that we do on the field, off the field, in the classroom, on campus, in the community, and just really trying to be deliberate about setting that standard of expectation, that standard of excellence in everything that we do. And that, from a cultural standpoint, just brings everybody up. And that's where we are right now. And the girls are doing a good job of it.
Speaking of culture, crackling yet? Had some crackling here in Lafayette?
I have not.
Crawfish?
I have not had crawfish.
Oh, okay. You got some
I've
stuff
had a couple
to do.
options. I've got some work to do.
Yeah.
Some late nights have meant drive through dinners.
Yeah, that's true.
And wife not being here, and hopefully she doesn't see all this going on, because she might get on me about my diet. But my diet's not been fantastic.
You're coaching.
Yeah,
you're in
that's
coach
it.
mode. Well, Coach, I thank you for your time, man. Welcome
Thank you.
to the university, and we're excited to see what comes out, man.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.